This podcast is a proud member of Pod Nation Media Network.
Flicker of reels, the shadows crawl. Curtains rise, a ghostly sprawl. The frames are whispers, the stories call. The tractors hum in a hollow tune. Moonlight cuts through a velvet gloom. Is it a dream or a real too soon? Step into the screen where the dark turns keen. Join you with the Cinephile, unseen, unseen. The tales twist and turn as the silent light burns. A world unknown where the shadows yearn.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast, where we take a deep dive into the world of horror cinema, from the eerie classics to the latest spine-chilling releases. Join me as I explore the history, themes, and artistry of horror one film at a time. Whether you're a seasoned horror fan or just stepping into the shadows, this journey is for you. So dim the lights, embrace the fear, and let's talk horror. And let's do that on episode 351. I am your tour guide of David Garrett Jr., recording out of Columbus, Ohio. So I'm back to doing my Scouring through the Sixes. This is going to be episode number 13 of doing this. So the featured reviews here, I have the Rogues Tavern from 1936. I'm going to pair this up with Her Private Hell from 2026. So we have 90 years apart where we're still having two films that are dealing with seedy criminals and being trapped with a killer. Thought that kind of made for actually a kind of cool little double feature here without even necessarily trying. But then for mini reviews, I have Tales from the Darkside, the movie from 1990. My Scouring through the Sixes rewatch is going to be The Dentist. I gave a rewatch to my 4K of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Then I got to check out Cold Prey 3. And then my 2026 rewatch is going to be the film Slanted. And then I'll end this out with 2 episodes of 100 Years of Horror for those mini reviews. So I don't think there's anything else I'm going to do here for this intro outside of saying thank you so much for listening. And I hope you enjoy coming on this journey with me.
Hey, it's Travis from the Bar Banter Podcast, where friends, drinks, and dumb debates collide. Ever argue, what's the best cereal milk? Or, could you fight 100 duck-sized horses? How about, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Spoiler alert, we're still fighting about that one. New episodes drop every Wednesday because your midweek needs more chaos. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, and all your favorite podcast apps. Be sure to hit the link tree at _Bar Banter Podcast. And when you do join us, be prepared to grab a drink, take a side, and banter responsibly.
Are you tired of the coffee?
And for my mini reviews here, I'm going to start with Tales from the Darkside, the movie from 1990. This is directed by John Harrison, written between George A. Romero and Michael McDowell, and this is based off of short stories that were written by Stephen King, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and I think McDowell did the other one that is included here. But this is starring Debbie Harry, Matthew Lawrence, and Christian Slater. This is a dark comedy, supernatural horror, comedy, fantasy thriller. This is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 6.2 on IMDb and Letterboxd at 3.2, with the synopsis being, to stall a witch plotting to eat him, a boy reads her horror tales dealing with Collegian's resurrection of a mummy, a murderous cat, and an artist packed with a gargoyle. So this is one that I actually had sought out after watching most of the show in college. I feel like I was using like DVR to record episodes off of Sci-Fi Channel or something along those lines. So I picked this up in DVD while I was in college. Haven't watched it since. So I was asked to cover the wraparound segment for a podcast anthological. Now, since I hadn't watched this with a critical eye before, I went ahead and just made it a journey through the Aughts Watch and, doing a mini review here as well. And I will go more in depth over on that one when that comes out. Yeah. So this is an anthology film that was made by the same team. So I'm going to treat it as such. As like featured film. I did want to bring up that this was directed by John Harrison, who was the composer of Dawn and Day of the Dead as well as Creepshow. He did other films as a director. I didn't realize that, but I'll end this by saying that this is more polished than the show was while keeping a similar vibe. Now, something else that is interesting is to include that this was originally conceived as Creepshow 3, which makes sense. You have the same production team that were involved with the first two. You also have Romero, who wrote one of the segments, of course. Richard P. Rubenstein was the producer, and one of the stories is being from a King short. So the tone would fit, as we have some moments that are mean-spirited while also being whimsical at times. I'll say that the wraparound is fun. It's an updated version of the Hansel and Gretel story. We have Timmy, who is portrayed by Lawrence, who has already been captured. I love this is happening in a suburban home. She is going to prepare him for a dinner party that she's having, and I'm assuming the other ones are going to be witches as well. I do like that he's telling stories from her favorite book to help bide time to get free. How it was written, they transitioned well into each story. The editing here is a bit abrupt in coming back from the story at times, but nothing bad there. So in Lot 49, this is going to be the first actual segment, though, is an impressive cast here, as you have strong performances from Christian Slater, Steve Buscemi, and Julianne Moore. So the plot revolves around a complex revenge narrative, pushing to the brink by bullies sabotaging his grant. We have this morally gray character of Edward, who is portrayed by Buscemi, as he retaliates using a mummy that he dispatches victims with via mummification rituals. The cycle of vengeance creates a layered, compelling dynamic among the characters. Then for the Cat from Hell, this one's a little bit more comical just due to its nature. This is credited to King, but it feels like he's doing like a variation on Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat. This is where things get interesting with the backstory as to why Drogon, who's portrayed by William Hickey, thinks that this cat is here for revenge. Part of what is happening is the characters are trying to kill this cat. It wants to live. It's absurd that this Halston guy, who is a hired hitman who is being brought in to kill the animal, that he would actually agree to take it on and everything, but with kind of things that are going down and everything, it does end up making sense in the end there. And I just want to make sure that I pull up the name real quick as to that would be David Johansen. Yeah, he's kind of got an interesting look about him and everything like that. He works well here. But this goes brutally with the effects and how it ends, and, it toes the line as well. So the final story is an interesting one to me because it's a variation of The Woman in the Snow that was famously told in Quaidon. The difference here is that we have an artist in a big city who comes face to face with a monster. It's the same premise that he needs to never reveal the secret or he'll be punished. It eventually becomes something that he tries to tell the love of his life, who is Carlola. She is portrayed by Ray Dong Chung. And then we also here have the artist is James Remar. I love the reveal with the stakes and the implications of everything. It follows the same beats of the classic while doing its own modern interpretation. So this is exploring themes of karmic retribution and poetic justice in like Lot 249, and the same thing for the Cat from Hell. While Lover's Vow, that's the last one, illustrates the consequences of broken vows. The wraparound segment subverts suburban safety, suggesting dark secrets hide behind closed doors, and class privilege is critiqued across multiple tales. Additionally, the anthology structure highlights the desperation of Timmy, who uses storytelling as a survival mechanism. Let's go over to the acting performances. This boasts some big names. So Debbie Harry is good as the villain here. She has that wolf in sheep's clothing. It's wild to see a young Lawrence as her captive. I've already gave credit here to Slater, Buscemi, and Moore. We also have Sedgwick, who works in his role for the opening story, and that is going to be Robert Sedgwick. He also plays, I like Johansson as he tries to kill the cat. He plays well off of Hickey. And then we also have a couple of other people here that get worked into this one as well. They are going to be Alice Drummond, there's Dolores Sutton, and then Mark Margolis. They all kind of work in that story as well. I've already said that Remar is good in his role. I'll also give credit to his agent in that one, who he kind of bumps heads with. That's going to be Robert Klein. And then we have Chong. They work in their story. The rest of the supporting cast around this offer what was needed. All that's left then to be filmmaking aspects. The cinematography framing are good. Remembering back to the show, which has a lower budget feel, this feels more polished. They're able to capture the setting for each of the stories. I especially like the wraparound with hiding the darkness in the suburban home. The effects were good. The mummy doesn't look all that great, but the kills in all three were practically brutal. And they did go practical from everything that I could tell, so that helps as well. Dick Smith did a lot of the stuff here, so other than that, the sound design and music fit for what was needed. In conclusion, this serves as a highly effective and polished evolution of its source material, successfully bridging the gap between the television roots and the cinematic quality of the Creepshow franchise. With a strong ensemble cast, brutal yet effective practical effects, and thematic depth regarding the karmic retribution and social critique, the film succeeds as both a whimsical and dark anthology. Director Harrison's ability to maintain a consistent tone across disparate stories, combined with the standout performances and expert craftsmanship, elevates the project beyond its standard TV to film adaptation. It remains a compelling piece of 90s horror that expertly balances dark humor with genuine, unsettling tension. So my rating here for Tales from the Darkside, the movie, I gave a 7.5 out of 10 to. And then up next is my Scouring to the Sixes rewatch of The Dentist from 1996. This is directed by Brian Usna. This was written between Dennis Paoli, Stuart Gordon, and Charles Finch. This stars Corbin Burnson, Linda Hoffman, and Michael Stadvik. So it's a dark comedy, psychological thriller slasher horror film from the United States. Slasher's a little bit looser, I will say that. But this is currently sitting on a 5.4 on IMDb and Letterboxd a 2.8. And this is from the United States, and synopsis: an extremely successful dentist goes off the deep end after he catches his wife cheating on him. So this is a film that I thought I had seen upon actually viewing it for the Summer Challenge series and realized I hadn't. I might have seen part of the sequel, but I'm not entirely sure anymore. But I was intrigued to see Usna was a director and Gordon was a co-writer. I've also, going to be honest here, I'm kind of scared of the dentist, so having things wrong with my teeth and everything like that. But having now revisited this for my Scouring Through the Sixes. So I'm going to start is by saying that there's some interesting things done here. Originally, I thought this was a slasher film in the vein of like Dr. Giggles. Instead, this is more of a character study of Dr. Finestone, who is portrayed by Burnson, as he spirals out of control. It does become a slasher film of sorts, but it's him trying to get revenge and then cover up his crimes, with each victim becoming more difficult. So let's actually look at Alan, and that's Dr. Finestone. He is a compelling, successful LA dentist struggling with mental health issues. We never learn exactly what they are, but the film effectively blurs the lines between reality and hallucination, leaving viewers to question the validity of his perceptions, such as his wife's alleged infidelity. There are things like accusing her of smoking, her denying, and then us seeing the truth that further draws questions. This certainly fuels his unsettling descent into madness. So I've already stated this, teeth issues have always made me cringe. My fear of major dental procedures makes this film particularly unsettling. Even with good dental health, Usna's direction successfully plays on that discomfort, causing me to squirm and verbally react throughout with some of the things that happen, so I had to give credit there. I will say I was also slightly disappointed. This, I would say, is actually more of like a quasi-slasher film, which we saw quite a bit of like the 80s and 90s. By this point, they were parodying them for sure. I wouldn't even say that what they're doing here, but the argument, this is more of satire. There's the idea that Alan has it all, but he isn't happy and losing his mind. I would have liked to see him stick to like the dentist aspect a little bit more with the kills. It takes time to get there, and some of the things that he does, it does get pretty horrific, which deserves credit. Let's then look at the other themes that are explored. We get like the vulnerability of trust and authority figures. When we sit in the chair, we expect that our dentist will do us what we expect. Dr. Finestone's mental state causing him to hurt patients. He then blames them, and this shows the pursuit of perfection and avoiding decay. Alan goes over the top with this. We also get like the suburban facade. It is assumed that everything is happy, but there's so much turmoil. We then have like potential sexual betrayal and the loss of control. So moving to the acting performances, I thought they were pretty solid. Burnson is believable as he descends into madness. I'll also say his wife in this, Linda Hoffman, who is Brooke, I think she delivers a fine performance, effectively anchored by hallucinatory nature of her role. Ken Foree fits as a detective part well. We also here have Molly Hagan. She plays Jessica, who is a hygienist. And then there's also Patty Toy, who is Karen. She's another one. They're both reliable in support. The cast is rounded out by effective cameos here by Earl Bowen and Mark Ruffalo, with Virginia Kina deserving special credit for her sympathetic performance, as she just so badly wants to get her braces off and things keep getting derailed. Also, that to be the filmmaking aspects. I do think the cinematography and framing were good. I especially like what they did with showing us the inside of patients' mouths. That up close and personal feel builds tension. I also like the hallucinations of rotting teeth. That's gross. The practical approach is well done. I was very surprised that they didn't try more of a CGI route. Oh, not this is well paced. The music and sound design fit for what was needed to help build the atmosphere. So in conclusion, this stands as one of the more disturbing character studies of a man spiraling into madness in a traditional slasher film. I'm trying not to judge this for what I wanted, which is more frequent dental themed kills. The film succeeds though with Burnson's convincing performance, unsettling practical effects, and an atmosphere that effectively exploits common dental anxieties. With strong supporting performances and tension building cinematography, it delivers a memorable, if slightly imperfect, horror experience. So my rating here for The Dentist, I give a 7 out of 10 to. And then I gave a rewatch for the first time of my 4K for this one. It's going to be Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. It was written by James V. Hart. The original writer is Bram Stoker. So this is starring Gary Oldman, Winona Ryder, and Anthony Hopkins. This is a dark fantasy, romance, supernatural, vampire horror tragedy film that is a co-production of the United States and United Kingdom. Currently sitting on a 7.4 on IMDb and Letterboxd 3.7. So the synopsis: centuries-old vampire Count Dracula comes to England to seduce his barrister, Jonathan Harker's fiancée, Mina Murray, and inflicts havoc on the foreign land. So Count Dracula here is going to be portrayed by Oldman, and then we have Jonathan Harker is Keanu Reeves, and then Mina Murray is Winona Ryder. So if you'd like to hear a previous review of this one, I did a mini review on episode 227, so I will direct you over to there. So this is a film that I remember coming out when I was growing up. It was always interesting to me because I didn't understand the implications of director like Coppola taking on the source material. I just recall it being like highly talked about, and it took me until after college to finally see this. So I've now given it a rewatch in the theater thanks to the Gateway Film Center, and I've also done my Trek to the Twos Now watch of a 4K that I own here. So Coppola successfully brings the material to life, remaining faithful to the novel as he can while he's adding depth to the Dracula backstory. Though a horror film with surrealist elements, it functions primarily as a tragic romance about Dracula's internal quest to reclaim his lost bride, demonstrating how love transcends time. So this leads into looking at Dracula's duality as both a suave prince and a bestial bat-like creature that serves as an allegory for lust and carnal desire. While the animalistic portrayal is stark, it effectively reinforces these themes, similarly like Lucy's foul mouth, and she is portrayed by Sadie Frost, is an act stemming from her wealth, contrasted like the red gown that she wears during her seduction, a deliberate symbol of passion that mirrors a transformation scene in Mina. This also explores like tension between science and religion. Dr. Seward's strict medical approach fails to help Lucy, whereas Van Helsing succeeds in bridging scientific expertise with religious faith to combat supernatural affliction. But this duality where like religious artifacts ward off evil and Dracula's existence stands as an act of defiance against God remains a central theme. Then to delve more into the themes here, I've touched on this, but it explores like connection between Dracula and Mina is love, reincarnation, and damnation. There are elements of Victorian repression. Dracula does open the sexual liberation by giving in to the base desires. I appreciate the science and modernity versus ancient magic of superstition. This pays homage to early cinema with camera tricks, blood also seen as a life, lineage, and contagion. So moving over to acting performances, Oldman is truly a treasure. I love how he gets multiple versions of Dracula here. The one in the past is tragic. The elder one seems very similar to the first, but he's able to convey age and wisdom out of despair. It's also creepy. The final one is the one that seduces Mina. We have some good parts of like arrogance, though being sad. There's also this animalistic take. He did an excellent job. Thought that Ryder was solid in her role. Hopkins is much like Oldman, always great. He's a bit too eccentric, but it works. This one, usually, you hear is getting grief as Reeves. His accent is off, but I thought he was fine. I do like Grant as Dr. Seward. He works well off of Ellis and Campbell, who are the suitors and become friends. Frost is good along with Waits as Renfield. I also like this cameo here by Monica Bellucci, who is gorgeous along with the other brides. I thought the rest of the cast rounded this out for what was needed. I also kind of realized I probably didn't introduce some of these people like Anthony Hopkins, Richard E. Grant, Billy Campbell, Tom Waits. The film's technical execution is masterful, characterized by surreal cinematography, framing, and editing. The practical effects, including Dracula's transformation into wolf, mist, and bat, are excellent, supported by period-appropriate costumes and grand score. My only critique is the pacing, which feels slightly overlong in its effort to adapt as much of the original novel as possible. So in conclusion, this is a masterful cinematic achievement that successfully blends tragic romance with gothic horror, exploring deep themes of reincarnation, faith, and carnal desire. The film is anchored by Oldman's versatile performance and strong supporting cast, which compensates for minor criticisms regarding pacing, accents. With its stunning practical effects, period-appropriate aesthetics, and ambitious narrative, the film stands as a compelling adaptation. So my rating here, then, for Bram Stoker's Dracula, I give a 9 out of 10 to. Then up next is a film that I've been looking for a few years and finally got to check it out. It's going to be Cold Prey 3. It goes by the original title of Fritville 3. Don't know how to say that in its country of origin of Norwegian, so Norway. But this is from 2010, directed by Mikael Brian Sandemos. This is written by Peter Fugelrud and Lars Gudmundsson. This is starring Ida Marie Buchenrund, Julie Rusty, and Kim Falk. Flack, something like that. But this is a slasher horror thriller film. This is currently sitting on a 5.1 on IMDb and Letterboxd a 2.5. The synopsis is, in 1988, a group of teenagers visit an abandoned remote hotel only to find themselves hunted by a psychotic killer through the Norwegian woods. So this is a film that, like I said, I've been seeking out for years. My sister Allison recommended the first two and I dug them, but this isn't readily available in the United States. I did have to get creative, Eden needing to generate my own subtitles, so I finally took it off my list as it doubles as a journey through the aughts. So where I'm going to start is something that is a benefit for me. I've seen the original and sequel once. It has been a long time since I have, so I'm almost completely separated from it. So I've seen multiple reviews pointing out that this is a rehash of the first film. So I don't remember the finer details. I didn't necessarily have that issue. That's not to say there weren't things that didn't work for me, but just an observation to start with. Well, I'll say though, this is a decent little slasher film that is set in the woods. The problem that I have here is the story is a bit too complicated for its own good. It would have been better served to have like this mountain man just wreaking havoc. This one loses charm by taking what sets the original apart, a snowy landscape for like wet spring woods. There's also John and Einar, who are also kind of factored in here, as John's portrayed by Nils Johnson. I'll go ahead and say that Einar is portrayed by Terji Rains, and then the mountain man is actually portrayed by Ender Hezelsfeld. So having these two guys, John and Einar, their group doesn't know who they can trust. I do appreciate that to an extent, but by the end though, my interest kind of just waned, and I was just wanting a bit more mayhem. So going the prequel route is something I'm not always a fan of, especially for this subgenre of like slashers. Do we really need to know the backstory of this killer? Not necessarily, because I thought the original did well in setting the stage with old newspaper headlines. An issue I have is that we don't know, or we know the killer can't be stopped here. They come back for the next two films. The best thing that can be done is filling in a story that we saw the headlines for. I don't believe this does that. I do have a plan, I believe, actually to rewatch the original one here in the winter, but this feels like a cash grab, and I can't fault the team for, doing what they can to make money. So let's look at some of the themes here and explore like the making of a monster through witnessing this cycle of cruelty diminishes the killer's mystique. While the prequel angle emphasizes the inevitability of fate, the loss of a winter setting reduces the atmosphere despite the isolated location. Additionally, the group dynamics effectively illustrate how desperation fuels self-preservation and highlights character flaws. Let's then shift over to the acting performances, which I thought were fine. This group of people feel like they are real members of a group, given just enough for each one to distinguish themselves. I would say here, Beckerud, Rusty Falick, and then we also here have Pal Stoker and Arthur Burning. Thought they're all good, as well as Sturla Rui. Now, Rains is interesting. He seems like a good guy, but toes the line of offering, too much to make him suspicious. Johnson works as a stoic guy who is the opposite, and we don't know if he can be trusted or not either. Hez's fight, it brings some good sides to the role. I'll also give credit here to playing like his parents back in the past of Dennis Nielsen Nystrom, as well as Trine Wiggin, and there's also Halvard Holman. All that's left then is the filmmaking aspects. I'd say the cinematography and framing are good to capture where this is set. I prefer the snowy landscapes of the original, but this is still able to convey the isolation of the area. It is unforgiving. I did want a bit more of like the kill scenes, but this has brutality, which is good. The effects were solid. They went practical with everything that they could, and they used cuts to hide seams. Other than that, the sound design is solid. One scene in particular with hot wire in a vehicle, that was kind of a really cool thing they did there, and the music fit the atmosphere. So in conclusion, this is a serviceable slasher film that benefits from solid acting and effective practical effects, even if it struggles to capture the unique atmosphere of its predecessors. While it attempts to explore the origins of the killer and character dynamics during isolation, the film's complicated narrative and departure from the iconic snowy setting weaken its overall impact. By over-explaining the antagonist's background, the movie sacrifices the mysterious menace of the original, leaving it a well-made but arguably unnecessary addition to the franchise that lacks the visceral tension of the earlier entries. So my rating for Cold Prey 3, solid little movie that I give a 6.5 out of 10 to. Then I have another rewatch here of Slanted from 2025, getting its wide release here in 2026. So this is written and directed by Amy Wang. This stars Shirley Chan, McKenna Grace, and Amelie Zilber. This is a dark comedy, body horror, drama, sci-fi film from the United States. It is currently sitting on IMDb as a 5.7, Letterboxd a 2.8. So this one is, if I didn't say it, from the United States. Synopsis: an insecure Chinese-American teenager undergoes experimental surgery to appear white, hoping to secure the prom queen title and peer acceptance. So I did a mini review of this one on episode 333. So for this one, at its core, this is a body horror cautionary tale about a Chinese-American teenager who undergoes this experimental surgery by a company called Ethnos Inc. to look white and to win prom queen. It's a visceral exploration of the desperate high-stakes measures that teenagers take sometimes to fit in when they probably shouldn't. So I'll say Chan is the version when she's Jo Hong, and then when she becomes Jo Hunt, she's portrayed by McKenna Grace. So the film dives headfirst into heavy topics: Western beauty standards, cultural assimilation, and the friction between immigrant parents and their American-raised children. Even though Joan was born in China, but she was raised most of her life in the United States. While the satire of Ethnos Inc. is effective, the commentary is a bit heavy-handed at times. So for the performances, though, we have a dual lead here that helps to anchor this. Chan and Grace do impressive work mirroring each other's body's language and mannerisms to make the character feel genuinely unsettling and grounded because it is the same person, just, both sides of that coin. But for me, this struggles with tonal commitment. It sits somewhere between social drama and body horror, but because it doesn't lean enough either way, the final product feels slightly diluted. As a genre fan, I wanted more of the practical body horror that popped up on the screen. We do get something at the very end that I thought was kind of an interesting little thing to see where things are going to go from there, but I needed a little bit more. So despite being an imperfect swing, it's a memorable, ambitious film that sparks necessary conversation about identity, especially at this time in the state of the United States and just the world. For me, 7.5 out of 10, definitely worth the watch for the performances alone, I will say that. So yeah, Slanted, this is one that I believe I watched on HBO Max if you are curious. And let's end these mini reviews out with 2 episodes of 100 Years of Horror. First, I'm going to start with episode number 17 of Maniacs. This is about the slasher movie genre. They include Silence of the Lambs here. I wouldn't necessarily fall into there, but I understand why they do. But stuff like Peeping Tom and Beyond, etc. So let's talk about different versions. They do bring up, like I said, they start off with Silence of the Lambs with Hannibal Lecter. Peeping Tom is an interesting one. They also go to Circus of Horrors with Anton Differing. Then they go to the Horrors of the Black Museum. An interesting little title that I saw years ago. It's a precursor to Psycho. And then they also have binoculars with needles in it, and then stuff they do with Peeping Tom, which came out the same year as Psycho, is kind of interesting there. They talk about Michael Gogh. He was in Horrors of the Black Museum as well as Black Zoo. Then they also bring up Repulsion. I don't necessarily think that's a slasher film, but it's definitely playing with the psyche of characters. Now, they do go over to The Night Must Fall with Robert Montgomery. Wild that the killer had a head and a handbag in that one. That's something I've not seen before, and I've not seen the movie, and I've also not seen that part of it. So, yeah. So then talk about Robert Slaughter and The Face in the Window. I actually have that up to watch, I believe, here pretty soon. Then they bring up the drug scare films. This would include Maniac, the one from back in the 1920s. This was done by a carnival guy of Dwayne Esper. I've seen a few of his films. Then they go to Maniac from the 80s. That one's a devilish little film there. And talking about devilish, we go over to Les Diaboliques, which is The Devils, is a great little film title as well, because that's the translation. I guess this inspired Jimmy Sangster to do the film of Paranoiac. So Homicidal is another one. This had gimmicks from William Castle. Straight Jacket with Joan Crawford. That's kind of fallen into the hagsploitation stuff there, if I remember correctly. Where I know she's more of a victim in that one and might be getting messed with in her mind. Blood Feast, of course. That one I don't necessarily consider it a slasher film, but I understand it's more of a precursor. I would say 2000 Maniacs probably falls more into that. And they actually have a weird one that is dealing with the mental psyche of Dementia 13. Jake and I have actually covered that one. That was done by Francis Ford Coppola. And they actually talked to the same composer there, was doing that at the same time he was doing the film The Terror for Roger Corman. So Mario Bava had some of his great little films. They were more of the gialli, but yeah, that led the way to the slasher films like Halloween, hearing from John Carpenter, who gives a little bit of the history. And then, of course, Friday the 13th, which then would spark that whole craze there. So for me, I gave Maniacs a 7 out of 10 for that episode. And that'll take me over to then the next one, which is Gory Gimmicks. So this is examining the myriad of gimmicks used to enhance terror in the horror films, including Technicolor, 3D, insurance, and electrical shocks. So since the early films, you've kind of seen different stuff. They originally were just painted or tinted. Technicolor was used for premiere productions here. Colored the film before actually shooting in color. So Cinecolor was another early option. They bring up stuff with OG Invaders of Mars, I guess, was actually photographed in color, which is kind of a big deal there. I think it might have been one of the first. Fun that Christopher Lee was filming his parts at Hammer Studios for this documentary and everything, and it's kind of funny because he got made very famous to the horror genre because of that, working for Hammer, that is. Curse of Frankenstein was done with Warner to compete with television. Horror of Dracula was a follow-up there. So a lot of stuff was filmed in black and white, but Eastman would do the color of the film. Kind of fun to hear about from Joe Dante, who is definitely an expert and knows the history here. So 1950s, color was a major expense and it became much cheaper. AIP would use gimmicks to make it seem like things were filmed in color, only one scene would be, and they would show it in the trailer, and then people get there, they'd realize that was the only thing that was. They did some stuff here and talk about Return of Dracula or How to Make a Monster. Those were AIP type films. Sounds like Corman was able to convince the heads at AIP to give him a bigger budget. They originally wanted him to do 2 films for half the budget. He said if I could have a little bit longer of a film schedule, I could do 1 film for that putting both those budgets together, and that's when he did The Fall of the House of Usher in color. So a lot of stuff was filming in black and white, like I said, and they kind of thought that was just going to be a gimmick. Going over then to 3D, this would go back as far with like House of Wax with Vincent Price was the first. It's kind of funny because I've actually heard this before, but Andre Dutoth had only one eye, so he couldn't see 3D. And it's just funny because Price, in his interview here that we're showing, he talks about it. The Mad Magician was another one with Price that was in 3D. It Came from Outer Space was one that I have seen. That one had that. There's a lot of stuff that kind of ruined 3D, though, would be like lower budget movies trying it. It does pop back up occasionally. I've noticed like 1983 had a few of them. There were a handful in the 2000s, and then 2010s we did it. I mean, even like Avatar did the IMAX 3D type thing. The Quatermass experiment, I guess this was talking about like death by fright, and it helped to sell more in the United States because of that fear. They bring up here the great William Castle, stage manager for plays originally, which I didn't even realize. He worked with Bela Lugosi when he was doing the Dracula play, and he did a gimmick there. He would have a nurse on staff just for anybody who got afraid, and I thought that was kind of a cool thing to play with. He was definitely the king of gimmicks. And I guess it's actually funny here is near the end of it, Christopher Lee says that the term for these gimmick type things is ballyhoo, which I've heard that term, didn't know necessarily what it meant, so kind of fun thing there. But this is another one that I rather enjoyed, thought it was solid for what it did, and gave it a 7 out of 10. So that's all I have here then from mini reviews. Let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer, my first featured review.
Are you married?
No, I was born this way.
This is the kind of night that gives me the willies.
Something's always giving you the willies.
As soon as I can save enough money, I'm going to get out of here. I want to be where there's lights.
And for my first featured review is going to be The Rogues Tavern from 1936, directed by Robert F. Hill. This is written by Al Martin, starring Wallace Ford, Barbara Pepper, and Joan Woodbury. This is also featuring the likes here of Clara Kimball Young, Jack Mahal, John Elliott, Earl Dwyer, John Cowell, Vincent Dennis, Arthur Loft, Evo Henderson, Ed Cassidy, Silverwolf, and Robert McKenzie. We also hear this is actually a horror mystery film that is from the United States. It is currently sitting on a 5.2 on IMDb and a 3.0 on Letterboxd, with our synopsis being: a mad killer is on the loose in a hotel on a dark, gloomy night. So this is one I learned about when I was compiling my list of horror from 1936. It popped up as I've watched other films by this director here of Hill. I've also seen the stars here of Ford and Woodbury in other works. Other than what information I provided here, I did come into this one blind though. But let me start doing then some of my feature notes, and with our director of Hill, that he has come up multiple times this year. I've seen 4 of his 83 films for 4%. He's done 5 total in horror that I've seen, and he's done 5 total. I've seen 4 of them for 80%. I'm just missing The Haunted Island from 1928. So I've seen both versions that he's done of Shadow of Chinatown, A Face in the Fog, and now this. He has done 2 shorts in his career as well. So I've also brought up the writer here before of Martin. He has written 36 movies and 5 shorts. I've seen 4 for 11%. In horror, he's done 6. Everything that I've seen of his has been in genre, and I'm at 66%, as I've seen The Invisible Ghost, The Mad Doctor of Market Street, this, and A Face in the Fog. I have not seen Invasion of the Saucer Men or The Eye Creatures as of yet. So let's go over to the cast. Ford has done 122 films. I've seen him in 9 for 7%. Also has 1 short. Not horror would be working with Hitchcock with Shadow of a Doubt and Spellbound. He's done 7 in genre, and I've seen them all now. This includes Freaks, The Mummy's Hand, and Mummy's Tomb, as well as Ape Man, Night of Terror, This, and One Frightened Night. Then over to Pepper, she's done 89 works and 7 shorts. I've seen her in 4. So she's also done a Hitchcock film of Foreign Correspondent. I've also seen The Snake Pit, which I think is borderline horror. She was also in the original version of Mice and Men. She's done one other one in the genre with Murder, He Says from 1945. Then over to Woodbury, she's come up before as well. I've seen her in 6 of her 63 motion pictures for 9%. She has 2 shorts as well. Not horror would be The 10 Commandments and The Time Travelers. Has 4 in genre, and I've seen them all now. This would include things like The Bride of Frankenstein, King of the Zombies, The Living Ghost, and now this. And then the last person I'm going to give credit here is going to be Young. She's been in 67 features and 51 shorts. I've seen her in 3. There's one that she's done that isn't considered horror by Letterboxd, but I did, and that would be Chandu the Magician. It's Chandu and the Magic Island. I think this is something where they took some of those serial parts, they compiled it into like a film where he's just on this specific island. But I've seen her in 2 of her 3 horror works. I've seen The Return of Chandu. She was also in Lola from 1914 as the lead. And actually, now I'm thinking about it, Chandu and the Magic Island might have actually been from Return of Chandu, where they did the editing down, like I said. Jumping into this movie here, though, we start with a couple that are trying to get married. There is Jimmy Kelly, portrayed by Ford, and Marjorie Burns, portrayed by Pepper. He is a detective, where she does the same exact thing, but for a department store. They're told to go to Red Rock Tavern. A justice of the peace is going to officiate their wedding. When they arrive, they're greeted by a group here in the main room of this place. So it's ran by a married couple of Mrs. Jameson, portrayed by Young, and her husband is portrayed by Elliot. He is wheelchair bound, where Mrs. Jameson is at the desk. Now they're aided by Bert, who is portrayed by Dennis. He has a stutter, and he's their bellhop. Mrs. Jameson informs the couple that they do not have a vacancy, and she seems uneasy as she relays this information. So in this room is Bill, portrayed by Mahal. There is Morgan, portrayed by Dwyer. There is Hughes, portrayed by Cowell, and then Mason, portrayed by Cassidy. So there's a couple of these guys here are waiting for a guy named Wentworth, portrayed by Loft. Now, he sent them a telegram asking him to meet them there this day at this time. So there's also Gloria Robluff, portrayed by Woodbury. She's a fortune teller, and she is sitting with Harrison, who is portrayed by Henderson. Now, she's using a deck of playing cards to tell his future. Gloria looks stressed when the Ace of Spade comes up, because I guess, according to her, that's the death card. Harrison laughs it off. So it takes a turn, though. He goes to his room and he's ended up being murdered. The guests hear the commotion and they go into the room to see what happened. It appears that his throat was torn out by a large dog. There is one that is outside and it gets chased away with one of the guys shooting at it. So a coroner is called and asked to come out to kind of look at everything, sign the death certificate, all that stuff. Until then, the people have to decide what to do. Jimmy is going to share a room with one of the guys because he kind of agrees to look into everything that's happening here. Glory offers the same to Marjorie. Jimmy reluctantly looks into the case, like I was saying, trying to solve what happened. So more people are attacked, and the initial evidence is pointing that this dog is the one doing it. And then Jimmy makes a discovery to refute this. He shares this with Marjorie, who is trying to figure out what is happening separately from him because she's trying to prove herself that she can do it too. Everybody's a suspect. The numbers dwindle. It is a matter of time to survive the eve. So that's only my recap of the characters. What I want to start is that this is a unique little murder mystery that feels like a variation of the 1930s stage to film adaptations. I particularly appreciated the higher than average body count for the era. The story cleverly navigates Hays Code censorship by revealing that most of the characters here are actually criminals, which provides a motive for their targeting. And I like how they get everybody here, so that also makes it feel like it's not as contrived. Where I'll then go would be the characters that are assembled. Jimmy and Marjorie arrive at the remote inn for a wedding, only to disrupt a master plan already in motion. The inn is occupied by a group of people. Amongst them are jewel smugglers, and their criminal activities are actually key to unfolding the murders. I appreciated the killer, though driven by a sense of morality, has finally snapped. A surprising plot twist that kind of deserves credit for being this early into cinema. Something else would be the weapon that's used. I won't spoil it, but there's a reason that a dog is first considered to be the killer. Originally, they're blaming it on this dog that they have him credited as Silverwolf. Was his name in real life. That seems to also be his name for the film, but they never actually say it. They just kind of call him Dog. So this almost becomes like an early eco-horror animal attack film as well. The weapon that ends up being used is a bit outrageous. It feels something like you'd see in the 1980s with the slashers of that era. Being that this is 50 years prior, deserves credit for the originality as well. So there's an issue that I have here with misogyny that is built into the story. Jimmy, being a detective, is marrying Marjorie, who is in a similar role but for a department store. There's an interesting element where she questions if she truly wants to marry Jimmy pretty early on, because there seems to be this feeling that she needs to give up her career. And I mean, it's also probably that he kind of talks down to her fairly regularly. She then goes about trying to prove herself over the night. I don't like that he talks down to her, like I said, and points out that he figured out things before her. Is the time that it was made, so that's kind of just something that's factoring in as well. The other themes that are being explored would be going back up that this dog originally being considered as a killer. There seems to be folklore, like a curse about a devil dog in the area, and the killer is trying to use that. I do love the idea of science and reason versus superstition. It also is playing with the idea of honor amongst thieves. When engaging in criminal behavior, there's that fear of being double-crossed and not knowing who you can trust. The last bit is with the setting. I love the illusion of safety being inside and the dog locked out. In reality, the true killer is already there. Now, let's go over to the acting performances, and I think this is kind of a highlight. Despite my earlier critique of Jimmy's attitude towards Marjorie, Ford and Pepper are solid leads who are effectively trying to solve this crime independently. I like how each one finds different evidence to bring to a different conclusion. The supporting cast, including Woodbury, Kimball, Young, Elliott, and Silverwolf, are strong, though the print makes the quality of trying to figure out some of these things at times a little bit more difficult and distinguish some of the more background characters. Regarding filmmaking, the production value exceeds what you'd expect for a typical Poverty Row production. The remote tavern setting creates the illusion, especially once the guests realize that our leads are detectives. While leaning further into the old dark house aesthetic might have helped, it isn't necessarily something you need to do. The limited effects and obtrusive score work effectively to tell the story, in my opinion. So then just a little bit of trivia here before I close everything out is when Mrs. Jameson, who is young, has her speech at the end of the film, a photograph of a younger version of herself is visible behind her because she was an actor in the silent era, so it's kind of fun that they put a younger picture of her back there. So this obscure B-movie was one of the ones made available on the Internet Archive in the early 2000s, where it was available to stream for free. Once it kind of developed a minor cult following from there. So this one originally sounds like it hit the airwaves for television back in 1944 for New York City. And then the West Coast sounds like in 49 is when it got debuted out there on TV. In most currently available versions, the sound appears to drop out of print at about the 22-minute mark, cutting off much of Marjorie's lines where I was practicing to be a dutiful wife and picking up where Jimmy says, "Darlin', will you please hush up?" I don't know if that's something just wrong with the prints that are available and everything like that. Since this isn't, a big production, I could also see that there wasn't as much care. I mean, there's even some bigger ones that have more historical value that weren't necessarily taken care of. In conclusion, this is unexpectedly an engaging murder mystery that rises above limitations of the typical Poverty Row productions. While the film suffers from dated gender dynamics and a print quality that makes the large cast hard to track, these issues are offset by clever plot, surprising twists, and solid lead performances. By blending traditional detective work with atmospheric horror and original motive for its killer, this succeeds in creating a tense, memorable experience. It serves as a great example of how a limited budget can still yield a highly effective and inventive genre film for its time. And that's not to say that I'm going to, give this, the highest rating ever. But for the Rogues Tavern, I enjoyed what I saw here and gave it a 6 out of 10. Not going to do a spoiler section. There's not anything I necessarily want to delve into deeper there. So let me go ahead then and get you over to the trailer of my second featured review.
Beautiful. Sweet. Powerful. You either have it or you don't.
The moment you forget that, is the moment you disappear.
Have you heard?
There's been another victim of the Leather Man.
Is he a ghost? A monster? A god?
If you think he's playing games with you, he is. If you think he's gonna kill you, he is. Gonna be hell.
And for my second featured review is going to be Her Private Hell from 2026. It was directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, who also co-wrote this with S.D. Giordani. This is starring Sophie Thatcher, Charles Melton, and Havana Rose Liu, while also having here the likes of Doug Ray Scott, Shioli Katsuna, Christine Forsyth, Diego Calva, Parker Sawyers, Hidetoshi Nashijima, Lola Corfixon, Boy Ewald, Mark Grossi, Oi Yamida, Kim Magnuson, Jason Hendel Forsell, Martin Skoyby, Marcus Clausen, and Godfred Hansen Nord. So this is a dystopian sci-fi, psychological thriller, slasher, supernatural horror, crime, drama, sci-fi thriller film that is a co-production between the United States, United Kingdom, and Denmark. Currently sitting on a 5.0 on IMDb and a 2.4 on Letterboxd or Synopspedia. When a mysterious mist engulfs a futuristic metropolis, unleashing a deadly and elusive entity, a troubled young woman searches for her father. Her quest collides with an American GI on a harrowing odyssey to rescue his daughter from hell. So this is one that caught my attention when the trailer was playing at the Gateway Film Center. It popped out on my radar because it was playing ahead of things that I already saw, or I was getting ready to see actually. Figuring out that it was a horror film, that sealed it. Then I ended up learning that it was directed and co-written by Refn. That added to it, as well as starring Thatcher. I did have a feeling this was going to be surreal, just from the parts of the trailer that I saw, as well as just knowing Refn's other works. Other than that, I did come into this one blind. And actually, kind of let's get over to what I'm alluding to there, and let's start with some featured notes and do our director here of Refn. He has helmed 16 features and 2 shorts. I've seen 4 of his works. Not horror, I've seen Drive and Only God Forgives. I've seen his 2 films that are released in genre with Neon Demon and this. He is slated to do the upcoming Maniac Cop, which intrigues me to see what he'll do there. So we have 2 assistant directors on this project. The first one's going to be Niels Norlov Hansen. He's done this for 4 works. It looks like he works pretty regularly with Refn. This is the only one that I've seen and that he's done in horror. Then the same is going to be with Soren Lacour Fredrickson. He's done this for 2 movies and 3 shorts. First Visit I've seen, first in genre, has worked pretty much solely with Refn as well. And then let's look at our writers here. Refn co-wrote this. He's done this for 12 motion pictures and 2 shorts. I've seen 3. Has the same 3 in genre as well that he directed. Now, the co-writer is Giordani. This is their feature film debut. Then to Thatcher, who has come up previously as we move to the cast. I have now seen 5 of her 11 films for 45%. She also has 3 shorts. Everything that I've seen from her has been in horror. Everything she's done in genre at this time is what I've seen. The others are Companion, Heretic, Maxine, and The Boogeyman. Now, our co-star of Melton has done 16 features and 4 shorts. First Visit I've seen. He has one other one in genre with The Thinning, New World Order. Then there's Liu. She's been in 17 movies and 2 shorts. First of her works that I've seen. Has 3 in genre, with 2 of them being released. I have not seen Afraid. This looks like an AI movie because the AI on the poster was like kind of different than the other letters, but she's also attached to the untitled A24 horror film. I also want to give credit here to Scott. He's been in 53 works and 8 shorts as well. I've seen him in 5 films. That would be Deep Impact, Hitman. Those aren't in genre. He has done 8 in genre. I've seen 3 with this, Dark Water, the remake, 1 with Jennifer Connelly, the American version, and I've seen Sea Fever. I have not seen The Vatican Tapes, The Resort, or Perfect Creature as the top 3 that I am missing thus far. All right, then, for this movie, it's kind of difficult to talk about. I was lost for a stretch while watching this in the theater until I kind of just gave up figuring out what was going on here and just watching and see everything as it unfolds. We start by seeing this high-rise hotel that is called Tower Hotel. Now we have Ellie, portrayed by Thatcher, arrives and she walks through the hallway, and there's a young woman that's kind of sitting in a chair, kind of slumped over. She is Hunter, portrayed by Forsyth. Now, she is co-starring with Elle in this film that is based upon a comic called Candy Floss. So a series of events have led to her airline losing her Hunter's luggage. She gave up her room for some reason, and she doesn't know what she's going to do. Ellie allows her to stay with her. Bit of background information is that Elle is estranged from her father, Johnny Thunders, portrayed by Scott. We are introduced to him, and he's quite odd. What we get is that he's sleazy. He has a fetish where he seduces young actresses. This would include his current wife, Dominique, portrayed by Liu. Now, she used to date Elle, complicating things further. I also got the idea that Johnny was a director or like made films. He's definitely an auteur, but Elle, Hunter, and Dominique are starring in the sci-fi film. It's called like I was saying. So let me then shift over to the other story that runs concurrently with this. We first meet Private K, portrayed by Melton, after Elle finds his lighter in a coat pocket of her like leather jacket she's wearing. So he is a former American GI from the synopsis, and he lost his daughter. There's this odd mist, and from it we see bad things happen. Now, we end up seeing him go into a doll shop that he used to bring his daughter to. It is from here that he roams the alleyways until he comes to a club. It's run by Yakuza and seems to be peddling prostitution. So Private K goes in, fights the gangsters. This causes the police to punish him, whipping him with the belt in a kind of brutal scene that we see there. So there's this horrific murder then that Elle and Hunter witness. It is perpetrated by Leatherman, portrayed by Hendel Forsell. Now, he rips a woman's chest open while they watch in horror. So Hunter shares the lore about him that she was told. It sounds like it was actually told to Hunter by Elle's father. That would include that this Leatherman has 2 supernatural female foxes, so vixens, that help to find victims unless they can fight back. This entity might also be the devil. Private K is looking for him, believing he had something to do with the fate of his child. So that is where I'm going to leave my recap and introduction to the characters. Where I want to start is that this film is not going to be for everybody. And I'm already seeing ratings online, and that is the case. So to put this into perspective, Refn did Drive, Neon Demon, and Only God Forgives. That order of films gets weirder and more surreal. I'd say that this is closer to that last one here, where we're kind of dealing with a dystopian sci-fi future. This takes place in what I'm guessing is Japan. It's definitely like an Asian country. There are elements like our world while also being different, and I appreciate the world building there. So this does feature some meta commentary. Elle and the others are starring in the sci-fi project that is reminiscent of Planet of the Vampires or like Barbarella. The climax transitions unnaturally to this set, and a choice that feels connected to the title. Additionally, the mysterious mist appears at the tower's base, where Private K is like navigating the Yakuza-run streets below, effectively symbolizing the underworld. Where I want to shift then would be to look at our lead character of Elle. It sets up early that she's estranged from her father. She is desperately seeking that connection. There is some complicated situations here with the 2 women that spend time with her. Hunter is obsessed with public persona. She's trying too hard. Elle actually points this out and actually mocks her for it. And Elle still has feelings for Dominique. It is odd since this other woman is married to her father. The title factors in here since she is vying for the attention, but she is placated. She then decides to act out. Thatcher does a great job with her performance, and yeah, everything I see her in, she does an excellent job. Then I want to shift over to this other character here, Private K. There is less revealed about him, but we also get everything that we need. He's former military. He's in his own private hell and out for revenge. This causes him to start trouble with seedy people. There's an element here of him not being able to protect his family and the dishonor that comes with it. That is something that I enjoyed. Now, seeing the punishment he inflicts and endures in his penance, there is this grittiness to it that adds something to the surreal atmosphere, so credit here to Melton's stoic performance. So this also explores like paternal ownership by contrasting Private K, a violent protector, with Johnny, a predatory auteur who objectifies his partners as daughters, which is just creepy. Further themes include the duality between Private K and Leatherman, Elle's detachment from violence due to her immersive fantasy of like being in like filmmaking as her career choice, the depiction of trauma as a purgatorial state for the characters. There's also a good blend of futuristic sci-fi with a tower from the 50s, 60s Yakuza underworld below. Definitely love that, what they're doing there. So it should be enough for the story. Let's go over to the acting performances. I've already said that Thatcher was really good as our lead. She plays this character who is just floating through the world until we near the climax. We then see that she's broken and doesn't have much control. Melton plays his role stoically, and that works. You can feel that hurt underneath his mask. Liu and Forsyth help to build the story around Elle. Scott works in his role, as did Hendel Forsell. Now the rest of the cast, does round this out for what was needed. So all that's left before some trivia is going to be the filmmaking aspects. This is somewhere that Refn always shines for me. I love how he can create this futuristic world while still grounding it. Blending, there's this gritty underworld is good. The effects are something that you need to give credit to. The CGI works fine. Since it's a sci-fi film, I'm a little bit more forgiving because this isn't a world that isn't like ours, so things being a little bit different work. The brutality of the practically done effects is great. Seeing the fight scenes with Private K or what Leatherman does works. Other than that, the music adds to the atmosphere and fit for what was needed there for me. So then, trivia. Refn said the story originated from combining 3 separate ideas: a young woman arriving in a city that does not exist, a man willing to descend into hell to rescue his daughter, and a third narrative thread created specifically to connect these two into a triangle structure. Melton accepted the role before even reading the script, citing that he wanted to work with Refn, and that was a reason enough to sign on. So this borrows the film, a similar plot setting and story treatment of the film of the same name, Her Private Hell from 1986, that was directed by Norman J. Warren and written by Glenn Christian. Refn rewrote the script daily during production and even changed the ending midway through shooting without informing the cast or crew. According to Refn, only he knew how the movie would end for much of the production in order to preserve the sense of curiosity and unpredictability on set. Might also explain why I had some sort of issues with this on kind of like a surface level. So this was co-produced and distributed in the US by Neon. The company's CEO was the first person that Refn contacted when securing financing. Refn has called Quinn, that's Tom Quinn, the company's CEO, a very instrumental person in his life, as he helped to distribute the Pusher trilogy in the United States alongside executive producing Refn's film Only God Forgives. According to Refn, the company was named after the 2016 film The Neon Demon. That I could see potentially. So Melton did not read the script or perform a traditional audition for his role. During his first Zoom meeting with Refn simply told him cinema needs heroes before asking, what do you think about social media? Refn later explained that he prefers his approach to better understand people he'll be working with on set. So first time Thatcher, Forsyth, and Liu have been in the same project after Forsyth worked with Thatcher in the film When the Streetlights Go On from 2017, and then Liu was in 2025 play All Nighter respectively. So Forsyth starred with both of her co-stars, like we were saying there. So that's what it was. She was in that off-Broadway play with Rose Liu. So then, in conclusion, this stands as a surreal, challenging addition to Refn's filmography, effectively echoing the dystopian tone found in his previous works. While the film's abstract narrative may not appeal to every viewer, it succeeds with its immersive world-building and grounded, stoic performance delivered by Thatcher and Melton. By blending gritty practical effects with a haunting score, the film creates a unique, cohesive experience that rewards those willing to embrace its intense, surreal vision. So for me, this one, for the first time watching, I gave it a 7 out of 10. So I'm not going to do a spoiler section or anything like that, but this is definitely one that I need to revisit before the end of the year, because I have a feeling my rating is going to go up. Kind of the same thing I've had with his other films, is that I really enjoyed what I saw, but I don't fully understand everything that I did either. So that's all I'm going to do here. Let me go ahead then and get you over to one last break before I close out the show.
Pod Nation TV has you beamed up with Out of This World award-winning podcast, found exclusively on Pod Nation TV. Download Pod Nation TV for Roku and Fire TV. Pod Nation TV, Out of This World.
Listen, here's the truth. If it's not something you love to do, automation is mandatory. You didn't start your podcast to spend hours editing clips. You started it to create, connect, and grow your audience. But here's the problem. Every other platform works with video podcasts, and manual editing eats up your most valuable asset, your time. That's where Opus Clip changes everything. Upload your video, and Opus Clip will automatically find the gold nugget moments, auto-clip the captions for the best parts, perfect for TikTok, Reels, and Shorts. 1 hour-long episode becomes 10, 20, even 30 viral-ready clips in minutes. The tool even predicts each clip's viral potential, so you know exactly what to post. No more tenuous editing, no more wasted hours, just you staying in the place that you love to be, creating content that matters. Head to podnationopus.com for your free trial and get back to doing what you do best. Stop editing and start creating now.
And welcome back. So if you'd like to send me any sort of feedback, anything you want read on the show, or any screener requests, anything like that, you can send those to journeywithacinephile@gmail.com. If you'd like to read any of my written reviews or see any of the old past podcast episodes, all of that is being stored over at Journey with a Cinephile. That is my blog, and that's going to be horrorreview.webnode.com. If you'd like to follow me and become friends on Facebook, it's going to be David Garrett Jr. is my name over on there. There's going to be a link in the show notes. And then if you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's going to be Buckeye from Mish. And then if you'd like to follow my Letterboxd page, where I have all of my reviews, whether that's going to be horror or non-horror, that's going to be David OSU is my name on that. Instagram and Threads, I'm David OSU87. Over on my personal Instagram page, you might see some of my family stuff every now and then whenever I remember to post something. My wife is much better at it than I am. But then if you'd like to follow the Journey with a Cinephile Instagram, that's going to be Journey with a Cinephile, all one word. And then also direct you, if you'd like, to the Discord channel. That's going to be the Nightclub Discord, but I have a page over there. And there's also some other great pages of other shows and them kind of messing around and everything like that. Do highly recommend if you want to go ahead and check that out. And then the last thing I'll actually say here, if you would like to listen to the show a day early, this is always going to be streaming over there on the Pod Nation TV app. So I will have, once again, a link in the show notes for that if that is something that you're interested in. So, yeah, there's some great stuff here. There's some great shows on some of these other networks and stuff. I highly recommend checking them out. And for episode 352, it's going to be another of my Scouring Through the Sixes. So the 2 featured reviews, as of right now, I don't believe there's anything coming to the Gateway Film Center that I was going to check out there. So I might end up just watching Scary Movie 6. Now that is available on VOD. So that'll probably be the featured review. I'll have something that I'll be pairing up with The Golem, The Legend of Prague. This is from 1936. I'm winding down on the last few films there to finish out watching everything that's available from that year. But then I have already given a rewatch for my Scouring Through the Sixes of Bad Moon. I will have, I believe, Haunters of Silence is going to be my 2026 rewatch, and I'm going to go to the Gateway Film Center. I'm hoping to at least to watch Cannibal Holocaust. This is kind of a bucket list film, but I'll have more mini reviews on top of that for the episode. So I don't think there's anything else I'm going to do here for this outro outside of saying that wraps up this episode of Journey with a Cinephile, a horror movie podcast. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of horror cinema. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more deep dives into the macabre. Until next time, keep watching horror, and remember, fear is just a frame away.
It had been a wonderful evening, and what I needed now to give it the perfect ending